Hello there, I'm Glenn Roberts and welcome to my brand new video series, How to Deadlift Over 700 Pounds. This video series comes in 7 parts, 7 for 700 pounds. This is part 1 and will cover the background and history of my deadlift progress. First of all, I just want to say that I'm qualified to do this How to Deadlift 700 Pound video series because I have actually done it. I have deadlifted 705 pounds and you can also find that video on my channel as well. Plus, if you go to my playlist titled Training Vlogs, you can take a look at all the videos. It's called The Road to the 700 Pound Deadlift, and all them videos document all the training that I did in the run up to the 700 pound deadlift. So you can find them videos on my channel as well. I'm a big believer that if you wish to learn something, it's usually best to learn it from someone that has actually done that which you wish to achieve. This is usually the approach that I take when I want to learn something. No speculators or wannabes are even entertained. I want to learn from someone that's actually been there and done it and knows what they're talking about. There's a lot of people out there, especially on YouTube, that will make a video about how to do something and then it turns out they've never actually done it themselves. You know, I don't want to be that guy. I wanted to make this video a while ago, but I held back because, you know, I said to myself that I wasn't going to make this video series until I've actually physically lifted 700 pounds so that I can say, yes, I've actually done it now and here's the proof. That's why in this video series, I'm going to show you how I lifted 700 pounds. Now, I'm not so bold as to say that my way is the best way or my way is the only way, you know, because I'm a big believer that there's more than one way to do something correctly and there's more than one way to achieve a goal. But this is just my own info and stuff that I've either learnt from others, you know, or stuff that I myself have learnt through the years through trial and error. Not only am I going to show you the exact training program that I used to pull 700 pounds, that comes in episode 7, but first of all I want to take you back and basically give you some insight into the training that I did in the months and years prior to pulling this 700 pounds. My deadlift journey actually began way back in 2001, but I want to share it with you today because I want to give you some insight so that hopefully you won't make a lot of the mistakes that I made along the way. And I did make a lot of mistakes, so yeah, hopefully I should be able to make the journey a little bit shorter for you and take out some of the guesswork so that hopefully, depending on where you are, you can reach your goals quicker. I can't promise that you will deadlift 700 pounds, but by the time that you're finished with this video series, hopefully you'll be able to take away a few things and hopefully build a big deadlift of your own. So without further ado, we're going to start right from the beginning and see how my deadlift training has evolved over the course of the last 23 years. Okay, background and history of my deadlift progress. So I was born in 1981 and I went to high school in the early to late 90s, and they did have weights when we did PE, but it was mainly machines, and I did a bit of weights when I was in high school, but it was just for PE and I didn't really think nothing of it. It wasn't until 2001 that I bought a weight set for home from Argos. Actually, it was quite a cheap little setup, and that's how I first started out. Okay, so we're going to start with 2001. So 2001, now if memory serves, I think 166 kilos or 366 pounds is the first deadlift I remember, and I think that's what I deadlifted the first time I ever touched a weight. So I started training at home, and what I had basically was just a small little setup. I had a bench and I had my weight plates. It was just a crappy weight set from Argos. So as a lot of you know, most of the bars and plates nowadays, they're Olympic. So what I mean is that, you know, a normal Olympic weightlifting bar is about 7 feet long or about 2.18 metres, and the Olympic bars normally weigh 20 kilos, and the plates are the holes are normally like 2 inches in diameter, and the bars are 2 inches thick. So an Olympic bar will fit an Olympic plate, but what I had was the standard ones where the hole is only 1 inch thick and the bars are a lot thinner. So I remember I had 2 weightlifting bars. One of them was 5 feet long and it weighed about 6 kilos, and the other bar that I had was 6 feet long and it weighed 7 kilos. They were really very skinny, and I had the little clips that went with them, but they were very cheaply made. Like I say, they were bought from Argos, and it was the very first weight set that I ever owned. And I used to train in my bedroom, and when I first started out, I was about 19 or 20 then, and I didn't know nothing about training at all. Like I say, I was quite clueless about training, but you know, anyway, I did bench pressing as well and stuff. I never really did squats though, because I didn't have a squat rack. So all I really did was just bench pressing and deadlift, because they were safe lifts really. I mean, with the bench press, I literally used an empty bar and just did loads and loads of reps, because I just didn't know any better, and I thought that that was the way to go. Whereas with deadlifts, I did train a little bit differently. I kind of instinctively knew that high reps on deadlifts wasn't a good idea, so I did low reps, and a lot of times I would just do low rep deadlifts and just try and lift as much as I could really, and I just gradually went up and up and up really. And I remember in 2002 I deadlifted 197 kilos or 434 pounds, and the reason I remember that stuck in my mind, that lift specifically, was because I remember dropping it and I made a nice big hole in the bedroom floor, which my mum wasn't too happy about. But and that hole needed filling in, so yeah, that wasn't the best thing. But yeah, so basically afterwards I was told to take my weights in the garden, so I did. I had a little gym shed right at the back of the garden, mainly made out of wood, so started training out there, carried on. Thing is though, is that the roof wasn't very good, and I don't even think it was finished, so when it rained everything would come down and get wet. So 2003, I remember I deadlifted 207 kilos or 456 pounds. These might seem like strange weights, but that's because one of my bars was 6 kilos and one of my bars was 7 kilos. So if you can imagine, when I first deadlifted 166 kilos, so I've got 420s on one side, 420s on the other, so it's 160, and then my little standard weightlifting bar was only 6 kilos, so I've got 166 kilos, and then when I was training in the garden I deadlifted to 207 kilos. It's literally got 5 20 kilos on each side, so you've got 100, 100, 200, and then a 7 kilo bar that's 6 feet long, so you've got 207 kilos. So yeah, that's what I had, and that's hence why a lot of my deadlifts then would end in 6 kilos or 7 kilos. Also, because the bars were quite thin and cheaply made, I do remember that 6 kilo bar getting bent actually, and once a bar is bent it's never quite the same again after that really, and it's harder to lift on. So bent a 7 kilo bar. I do remember as well, I bought a power rack when I was in the garden, and that I remember it cost me about £300 or so, because that was about the time that I did start doing squats. My squats have always been weak in relation to my deadlift. I think the best squat I ever did was 240 kilos. I mean, back in the day, I never used to do squats because I didn't have a power rack. But then later on, when I started to do strongman, I never really focused on squats. Squats was always like an afterthought, because in strongman you don't really get squats in a competition. So I think it's because of them two reasons really, that because some people, they can squat more than they can deadlift, but for me my squat was always significantly behind my deadlift, and I think they're mainly the two reasons why. I mean, I do box squats and all that, and I did lots of box squats and stuff, but that was mainly just to improve the deadlift really. And I'll get on to assistance and deadlift variations in another video, but yeah, squat was never a great one for me. And I remember as well, when I bought this power rack as well, I did rack pulls above the knee, and I remember doing about 310 kilos or something, and I ended up bending the bar. So I ended up, I think I ended up, I didn't sell the bars, so I couldn't because they were bent, but I do remember eventually selling the weights when I stopped training at home. So moving on to 2004, and I deadlifted 216 kilos or 476 pounds, and that was the last lift that I remember doing in the garden. And for a long time I just couldn't get past that really, because the thing is, when I was training then, like I said, I was just winging it really. There was no structure to my training. I didn't really know what I was doing, and after a while I just pretty much got tired of training. I would I'd make progress for a while, and then it would stop, and then my progress would go backwards, and I'd get weaker. And thing is, training back then was like a flavour of the month for me. Really, I wasn't really that serious about it. I'd do it for a while and all that. I'd get stronger, get excited about it. Then it would all start going to shit basically, and I'd end up getting weaker, and then I'd get sad, and I'd be like, "Oh, I can't be bothered with this really." And yeah, so after a while, I just sold my weight set off eBay. A guy came round and took all the plates and all that. So that was the end of my days training at home in the garden. So yeah, I didn't train for about a year and a half really, but then after a while I started getting the itch to want to train again really. Since I sold all my weights, I couldn't train at home anymore. So for the first time ever, I went to a gym. So this was late 2005 now. I went to a gym called Estuary in Southend, and it was a really old-fashioned type gym. This gym also had standard plates, which is exactly what I had at home. But it had a lot of very old-fashioned machines. A lot of them you can't even get in gyms now. It really was one of them very old-fashioned spit and sawdust type gyms, which sadly don't exist nowadays. Anyway, so I went down there and tested my deadlift, and it was about £415. So my deadlift had gone down by about 60 odd pounds. Now the plates in this gym were all in pounds. Most gyms nowadays, I mean, even the weights that I had at home from Argos, them weights were kilos, but all his weights were in pounds. So instead of having 20 kilo discs, they would be £50 plates. And he had £35 plates instead of 15 kilos, and he had £25 plates and £20 plates and £10 plates and £5 plates. All his weights were in pounds, which I found was quite interesting really. I mean, he'd had that gym since the 1960s, so even when I went down there, the gym was over 40 years old at that point. I mean, I don't think them type of spit and sawdust gyms really exist anymore. I mean, it used to be under a social club, so you'd go downstairs and it was like a basement, really, and it was just something out of this world, really. It was just so old-fashioned, really. It was literally like a time capsule from the 1960s, and a lot of good bodybuilders had gone down there. I mean, when I went there was a lot of old guys that used to train there, and they'd been bodybuilders in the 60s and 70s, and now these guys were like in their 60s and 70s, and you know, they were still training, and I'm like the young guy down there. At this point I was 24 years old, so I'm training with these much older guys, but where they're doing bodybuilding, I wanted to be strong. But yeah, that's where I started at. It was the very first gym that I ever went to, and I've always found that I get on better if I go to gyms. Just the motivation, really, just having people around. I mean, some people train better when they're at home, but with me, I find when I'm at home and all that, sometimes it's easy to get lazy. I've just always naturally found that I do better at gyms, just that atmosphere, really, of the place. So anyway, with this gym, I did start training again, and I specifically remember in November 2006 I got my first £500 deadlift, and I think my bench was about £300 at the time. I did do a bit of squatting as well, but my squat was always weak. I can't remember how much my squat was, but it was probably in the low 300s, so it probably wasn't much more than my bench press, really. So there was almost like a £200 difference between my squat and my deadlift. Okay, so moving on now. So I remember at the end of 2006 I was like 20 stone, and then going into 2007 I was getting stronger, but I was putting weight on, and there was one point where I got up to 21 stone, and I wasn't really happy about that, and I just wanted to lose the weight. So I stopped lifting and I started cycling, and I remember at one point I was cycling like 13 miles, not every day but most days, and did that for quite a few months, and I did lose quite a lot of weight. I dropped 5 stone and I went all the way down to 16 stone, which is the lightest I've been for years. Unfortunately, when I went back to the gym, I tested my strength, and my strength was piss poor compared to where it was before. And I remember at one point my bench was like 340 or something, and now my bench had gone all the way down to 300, and my deadlift had gone down to like 390. So yeah, I wasn't happy about that. I mean, you know, I lost the weight, which was good. You know, I'd been successful and had accomplished that goal, what I'd set out to do, but I lost a lot of strength in the process. And looking back, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. What I should have done is stayed with the lifting but done the weight loss and all, but I didn't. I just stopped doing the lifting completely and focused on the weight loss, and unfortunately I did lose a lot of strength. My strength did suffer as a result of doing that. So if memory serves, I didn't really do a lot of training in 2008 either. If I did, it probably would have been towards the end of 2008. I mean, I did keep logbooks then, but I don't have them now. And I mean, I always kept logbooks from a very early stage, but I didn't have any videos or training footage at all. I remember having a phone in 1999, but it was just a basic phone, basically just to make calls and texts. I didn't have any cameras on my phone then, so I had no footage of training until about 2009. But I remember in 2009 when I started training again, on the deadlift I got up to 218 kilos or 480 pounds, and at that point I got a phone and I did start to video my lifts. I had a camera. It wasn't a very good camera, but by then we had YouTube and Facebook, and social media was starting to grow, and I did start recording my lifts. And I remember in November 2009 when I achieved a 510 pound or 231 kilo deadlift. My bench press and all was quite good. My bench was 365 pound or 165 kilos, and I remember thinking at the time, you know, it's not going to be long before I deadlift 400 pounds or even 500. You would have thought that if I could do 365 back then, that I would easily get to 400 and maybe even 500 now. But I never did. The most I've ever done on bench press is 380 pounds or 172 kilos. To this day, I've never beaten that, and I think that 380 bench, I did that in about 2010, and I would like to bench press 400 pounds, and that's a goal that I probably will do at some point. But for the longest time, I've been focusing on this 700 pound pull. So what we're going to look at now is the footage of my very first ever deadlift captured on camera, the 510 pound deadlift. And this was November 2009, so I was 28 years old at the time. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Okay, so we're going to look at this 510 pound deadlift. So it was actually the second video that I ever did. The first video that I ever did was the 365 pound bench press, and this was the first deadlift video I did, but the second ever YouTube video that I ever did. And this was November the 24th, 2009. So I would have been 28 years old then. So you can see these 50 pound plates right here, and the bar, I believe, if memory serves, I think the bar was 25 pounds, but I'm not sure. I think it was about 6 feet long. Notice I've got the little stoppers there to make sure I don't hurt the floor. And you can see then even that I'm strong off the floor but weak at lockout. Even then I hitched, and that's something that hasn't really changed. You can see I'm barefoot there as well. Although I never read about it, I instinctively knew then that deadlifting barefoot or just with socks was a good idea. I mean, there are some videos where I lift in trainers, but back then, just through trial and error, I realised that deadlifting barefoot or in socks was a good idea. So yeah, that was in the old Estrie gym. I think that was actually the first and last video that I did. You can see the quality of the video here was really poor because the camera I had wasn't that good. But yeah, this video is from Estrie, the gym that I was telling you about, that was owned by Mr. Roy Perrott, and he'd been a bodybuilder back in the 60s, and like I say, it was a really old-fashioned type gym. You can see the dumbbell rack in the background, and yeah, unfortunately, Estrie doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, that is the £510 deadlift that I did in Estrie in 2009, and you can see there was where I'm using a mixed grip. For a long time I would not use straps, I didn't have straps, and so I'd use a mixed grip in a lot of the deadlifts that I did in the early years. So that's that one. Okay, so after Estrie I went to another gym called Spit and Sawdust. You can see the writing in the background there, Spit and Sawdust. So this was the second gym that I ever went to, and this was November the 3rd 2010, so it was actually my 29th birthday. So I hit a nice birthday PR. This is 250 kilos or 550 pounds. You can see that I'm still using a mixed grip, which I did for a lot of the early years of my training. So again, as you can see, strong off the floor and then hitching, because my lockout was always weak, and it always has been to this day. It's kind of like a running problem I've always had. So if we look here, like I say, I'm wearing trainers there, but I don't usually, I just happen to be on this particular day. So this is a £40 increase in 1 year, so I was quite pleased with this. I was really training diligently then, and did make quite a few gains actually. This was also around the same time that I bench pressed 380 pounds or 172.5 kilos, and it's the best bench press I've ever done. 14 years later I've still not surpassed that, but like I say, one of my goals is to bench 400 pounds. Maybe that's something I'll do in the future. I do definitely believe I'm capable of it. So so Spit and Sawdust, that's the second gym I went to, but then around the same kind of time I did start going to a gym called Evolution as well. Okay, so this is January 2014. This is 255 kilos off a 2-inch deficit. So I'm using that plate there to create the 2-inch deficit by standing on it. I had deadlifted 255, but I couldn't remember when I'd actually done it, and this is the only video that I could find of the 255. Notice I've got a narrow stance there, and really struggling at the top. My form was absolutely atrocious then. So this was January 2014. So I would have been 32 years old at this point. Now we're moving on to 270 kilos. This is a floor deadlift now, and was a PR for me at the time. And this was February 2014, so 1 month later. So notice here now I'm using a wider stance. I've been watching and following Brian Shaw's video, and I think actually this was inspired by watching Brian Shaw's 448 kilo deadlift that he'd done in 2013 for his training for World's Strongest Man. So I've used a wider stance here, and it felt more comfortable getting down, but again, notice that hitching is still a problem, still an issue. It's really cringeworthy to watch some of these old videos back. But this is in Evolution in Leigh-on-Sea. Okay, so one thing I did want to bring your attention to as well is if you look at my YouTube videos, this is around 2014, and I believe this is one of the things that kind of like halted my progress a little bit, is the fact that not only was I doing deadlifts, but I was doing lots of box squats, you can see here, and lots of deadlift variations. So you can see that trap bar deadlift, 4-inch deficit deadlift, Jefferson deadlift, which is basically where you deadlift the bar between your legs, behind the back deadlift, which is the same as a normal deadlift but with the bar behind your legs, sumo deadlift, 6-inch deficit deadlift, 2-inch deficit deadlift, deadlift on the hammer strength shrug machine, and I was doing box squats at various heights. Main reason being is back in them days,
I was doing or trying to train like West Side, so I'd be maxing out a lot of deadlift and squat variations. So here's another one: snatch grip deadlift, Zercher squat, safety bar squat, trap bar deadlift with low handles, trap bar deadlift with high handles, bottom up squat from the bottom of the pins, and I was doing lots of other pin squats as well. So basically, the reason I'm telling you this is because I did lots of deadlift variations as well as the deadlift. Now, I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm going to do a separate video on deadlift variations and how to use them, when and where to use them, when they will help your regular deadlift. But just know this: I didn't really know how to apply it back then and how to make it work for me and increase my deadlift. For a lot of the times I was just doing deadlift variations just for the sake of it, not so much to help my deadlift, but basically just to max out on all the different deadlift variations because I thought that it was fun at the time. And so I'll get into why and why not that was not such a good idea, and also it was one of the reasons as well, I think, why my deadlift journey took a lot longer than it should have.
I'm not saying that deadlift variations or box squats or squat variations are bad, because they're not. They can work to help improve your deadlift, and they have helped recently, but back in them days I was just doing them just for the fun of it, just to max out on the different squat and deadlift variations. And last, I didn't really know how to apply it or anything. Now I do. So because I was too busy doing all the different deadlift variations and squats and all that, my deadlift, it was getting better but a lot slower than it should have done. And it would not be until July 2016 that I finally made my first 600 pound deadlift, which is right here. So I was almost 35 years old at this point. So as you can see, still using a mixed grip. This is Evolution, July 2016. So I was basically doing all them deadlift variations and stuff for about 2 or 3 years or so, really. So I was getting stronger, but I wasn't getting stronger. Wearing trousers on all I noticed for deadlift. I don't really do that now. I mainly use shorts and deadlift socks. I dropped it there, not sure why I did that. But yeah, I was told by a top strongman, actually, one of the piece of advice he gave me was to use deadlift socks. But back then I didn't know about that, so I just deadlifted in trousers, really. That's what I happened to be wearing. But yeah, 600 pounds raw, no belt as well. I did that 600 pound deadlift beltless as well, no straps. So that was the first milestone. Little did I know that it would be almost 8 years before I would get the next £100. Okay, so moving on from that, 2 years later, in February 2018, I would deadlift 280 kilos or 617 pounds. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find the video. There was a period of time where I wasn't really doing YouTube a lot. That video was on my Instagram somewhere, but I can't find it. But I do specifically remember it was February 2018 because I also made a video as well, and you can find this video on my YouTube about how I increased my deadlift by 25 kilos just by changing my stance. Because for a long time I used like a narrowish kind of stance, and I kept changing my stance all the time. I kept changing my technique, and I will talk about that in the technique video. But basically, to cut a long story short, not only did I chop and change between programs and exercises, but I think what also delayed my progress on the deadlift as all was I could never find a stance or a technique that I was really happy with. I'd use a narrower stance. Then in 2017, December 2017, I met Brian Shaw. I went to one of his seminars and all that, and looked at his technique, and he uses a very wide stance. Now, I don't use a stance that wide because I'm not 6'8" and 30 stone, but based on that, I was a bit inspired to use a wider stance, and it did help. I did go up to 280 kilos on the deadlift in early 2018. But like I was always chopping and changing between wide stance, narrow stance, and just a lot of other things. I was slowly learning more about deadlift technique and stuff. There was, because looking back at my old videos, and it's quite cringeworthy to look back at them to see how bad my technique was, but it slowly got better over time, and I did pick things up and learn things and all that, but it was a very, very slow process, a lot slower than it should have been. So yeah, by early 2018 I was up to 617 pounds on the deadlift. Okay, so December 2019, I got up to 290 kilos, or 639 pounds on a deadlift. By this point I was now using straps, I was using deadlift socks. My technique, as you can see, was a lot better. Still not quite the wide stance that I'm using now, so a little bit of a hitch there, but that is a much bigger and better improvement to what I was previously doing, so that was a really good result for me that day. So as you may have noticed from that video as well, new gym as well. So February 2017 I started going to Stackhouse, which is the gym that I'm still currently training at. I've been training there just over 7 years, and yeah, it's a really good gym. It's got strongman stuff and all, because like I say, I was primarily doing strongman, and you know, it's my gym of choice really. I mean, I do occasionally sometimes go to some other gyms, but that's mainly my go-to gym. It's what I'm comfortable at, it's what I'm used to, it's what I've been doing for so many years now. So did that 290, and training was going really well. I was really focused on deadlift at that point. And I remember at the beginning, I believe it was February or March 2020, I pulled my first ever 300 kilo deadlift, or 660 pounds. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find that footage anywhere. So training was going really well. And then unfortunately, in March of 2020, COVID hit, and that's when it all went wrong. It all went down the toilet, basically. So I live in the UK, I live in England, and the gyms were forced to shut. I was also ill at the time. I believe it was COVID, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I had bad flu, I couldn't get out of bed, and I had a bad cough for about 3 weeks. I was off work for 4 weeks, and couldn't train at all. I don't think I trained for about 2 or 3 months. So about April, I started to feel a bit better. I had 4 weeks off of work. I managed to. I don't think I started training until about May though, so I didn't train for about 2 or 3 months. I believe it was about May or June, because you can actually see them videos on my YouTube, and I had some equipment, but it was basically just bare bones stuff. I had a barbell, I had some weight plates. I was lucky I managed to borrow some weights from a friend, and I managed to buy some additional weights so I could train at home, because at the time there was no telling how long this was going to go on for, and there was no telling when the gyms were likely to reopen, and I didn't want to lose too much strength. I was worried that I was going to, basically, so I wanted to get back to training as soon as I could, but unfortunately I did have minimal equipment, and I was living in a room, so I went upstairs and I was literally training in the front garden. That was the only way that I could train really, and like I say, you can see some of that footage. If you go back to my videos in 2020, you can actually see me training right outside my own front door, and so I didn't have a log, so for overhead I was just doing barbell clean and push press, and I was doing deadlifts. I did manage to buy a little rack, so I was doing front squats. I didn't want to risk doing back squats because I just didn't have a mirror and couldn't see, and front squats I just found were just safer, because if I couldn't do it I could just drop it. I managed to get some bumper plates and all. A lot of people were charging sky high prices obviously during COVID, because they knew that they could, so a lot of gym equipment was very expensive around that kind of time, but it's the way it was basically. So yeah, I didn't train for about 2 months and started off slowly. My barbell push press, I was struggling to do 100, and my deadlift went down. When I retested it in August of 2020, my deadlift had gone from 300 at the beginning of 2020. 6 months later, it was down to 275. So I lost about 25 kilos on my deadlift. Okay, so moving into August 2020, last I was down to a 275 kilo deadlift. But in August 2020, gyms reopened in England, and as many of you will know, in May 2020, Hathor Julius Bjornsson, the 2018 World's Strongest Man, pulled a 501 kilo or 1,105 pound deadlift, which was a new record and had surpassed Eddie Hall's 500 kilo lift. And although a lot of people say that it didn't really count, to me 501 kilos is still 501 kilos. To me it counted, and I was really impressed with that. And just after Hathor did that lift, he brought out this brand new program that he called Thor's Deadlift Gospel Program, and I purchased that program, and I was determined I was going to get back to the 300 kilos and surpass that 300 kilos, because even back then I wanted to deadlift 700. Once I deadlifted 300 kilos at the beginning of 2020, my next goal was 320 kilos. That's what I wanted. This is a goal I'll be chasing for 4 years now, but due to like a combination of events and stuff like COVID, for example, and I've had a few injuries and problems along the way, it's taken 4 years to get from that point to this point. So I purchased the program August 2020, started doing Hathor's deadlift gospel program. It was a 24-week program, so you have like 12 weeks of base building and then a 12-week peak. That's basically it in a nutshell. And he gives you like various variations to do during the base peak of it, and then as you get closer to peaking, you'll basically do the deadlift itself. And I'm not going to get too much into the program because we'll be here forever. I mean, this video's gone on quite a long time already, but basically, to cut a long story short, it was a 24-week program. I did 12 weeks of it. I did half of the program. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish the program because in December 2020 they closed the gyms again. So at the beginning of 2021, I moved in with my girlfriend, and it was a bungalow. It had a garden and it was quite big and spacious. So I spent nearly £2,000 on gym equipment because I wasn't going to let this stop me in my tracks. So I bought all this equipment, a lot of it, and again you can see these videos and you can see me actually training. Luckily the ceilings were quite high, so I was able to do log press. I actually bought a log, I think it was £200 if memory serves. It was only a thin log because that's the only one that I could get hold of, but to me a log was a log, and I wanted a log. I wanted my own log, so I got that. I bought an axle bar, I bought a power deadlift bar. I bought a lot of equipment at the beginning of 2021 because, again, like I said, it was because they opened the gyms, then they closed the gyms. Like I said, there was no telling how long this was going to go on for, and I thought, well, I'm not risking it. I'm not going to wait till the gyms open, go back, train a bit, and then they close the gyms again. I want to be able to train steady, and spending that amount of money. That's how focused I was on this goal, that I was prepared to spend £2,000 just so that I can continuously train, because like I say, there was no telling. At the time COVID was up and down all the time. There was relaxing restrictions, then they was imposing them again, and it was very unpredictable, and it was a scary time, at least for me. I mean, for some people it was a godsend because some people could work from home, but you know, for me it was just a bloody annoyance, especially closing the gyms and all that. It was really messing with my training. So I thought, well, I'm gonna, at least once I've got equipment I can train at home, then it doesn't matter whether they open or close the gyms, I can still just carry on anyway. So yeah, did that, and I think my lifts did drop a bit because I didn't train for about a month or so after, but then I did start getting back into it. Okay, so in May 2021, the gyms reopened again after having been closed for 5 months. So I went back down to the gym again because training at home, it was okay, but it just didn't have the same feel to it, the same atmosphere. And as I've said before previously, I just get on better when I can train in a gym. It's just easier for me. When I'm at home, sometimes it's just easy to get lazy and all that. And obviously where I was training at home, it was having to set up all the equipment and then put it all away afterwards and stuff, because the equipment would just sit in a corner and I had to get it all out, put all the mats down, get it all ready, then put it away again. It was just a pain. And because I trained on my own as well, I had to do that all myself. A lot of people have got like gym buddies to help them out, but I was on my own, so it's taken me twice as long to get all the equipment out and put it away again. So as soon as the gyms reopened in May 2021, I jumped at the chance. I went back there, and May 2021. At that point, I was stronger, and at this point, I'd got myself up to a 280 kilo or 617 pound deadlift. So strength was definitely returning. And then a month later, in June 2021, I pulled 295 kilos or 650 pounds. So although my deadlift strength was returning and all that, I did stop with the deadlifts a little bit. I still trained them, but in October 2021 I had a competition, and it was a 240 kilo deadlift for reps. So I was, instead of trying to continue on increasing my deadlift, I was training just for that competition, because there was a log press in there and all. There was a medley, a yoke and a few other bits. So at that point, I was just geared towards the competition, and in the competition, I got 240 kilos for 9 reps. So based on that, I knew that that my max would probably be around 305, 310, that kind of ballpark. So the competition was in October 2021. After that competition, I think I took a week off, and then I went back to training. And in December 2021, I hit a new PB in the deadlift of 305 kilos or 672 pounds. Okay, so after doing that 305 kilo lift in December 2021, I took some time off of training. At that point, I'd started doing fasting as well, so I would do a fast for a couple of days, not so much for weight loss, but more for like a cleansing of the system. I've actually found fasting quite beneficial. Actually, I used to have back pain and it would hurt when I walked, and I stopped eating. I fasted for about a day and a half, and my back pain really improved. I dropped a bit of weight, and my back pain wasn't completely gone, but it was a lot better than it was. I could actually walk long distance now without my lower back hurting. I've found sometimes that just dropping a bit of weight will sometimes help my problems. I remember a few years back I had plantar fasciitis. For those of you that don't know, it's basically a foot problem, and I dropped a couple of stone and it went away all by itself. So I found sometimes just dropping a bit of weight can sometimes ease some of the health problems you might have. So I would basically do a peak. In this case, I did, in December 2021, I peaked for that 305 kilo deadlift. Then I took about a week off training, did the fast just to reset myself. Then I did a restoration phase after that, and then I built up a brand new block to start deadlifting my peak. But this time I was peaking my log at the same time. So June 2022, I hit a 145 kilo or 320 pound log press, which is the most I've ever done on log press. And at the time of this video, it's still my PB for log. I still haven't surpassed 145 kilos on the log yet. So that one of my next goals moving on is to do at least a 150 kilo log press. So I peaked the log and the deadlift at the same time. So in June 2022, yet again, I hit a new personal best in the deadlift of 310 kilos or 683 pounds. So after doing that 310 kilos, in October of 2022, I did my first ever opens comp, and it was a 280 kilo axle deadlift for reps. And I got 3 reps. As a lot of you will probably know, an axle deadlift is a lot harder than a regular deadlift. So I did that competition. Unfortunately, 2023 wasn't really a good year for me. I had some health problems and stuff. And by October 2023, my deadlift was back down to about 290. I hadn't done deadlift seriously for most of 2023, and when I tested my deadlift, it had gone down to 290. So then I started training again, and this is when I started the program, and this is the program that I'm going to give you in part 7 of this series. So basically I started this deadlift only program. So basically just training 2 days a week. And by December of 2023, my deadlift was back to 305 kilos. So then I continued with the training, and by the time we got to March 2024, I attempted the 320 kilo deadlift, the 705 pounds, and I almost got it. I got it just above the knees. Unfortunately, I hitched and moved back and got out of position, and unfortunately the weight got away from me and I failed. So I built another 9-week plan to get it, and then finally on May the 2nd 2024 I finally achieved my goal that I'd been chasing for so long. I finally pulled 320 kilos or 705 pounds, and I was so ecstatic about it because it's a lift that I feel that I should have done much sooner. It's a lift that had eluded me for so long, but I put the planning in and trained hard and diligently. A lot of other lifts actually fell by the wayside in order for me to accomplish this goal, actually. So pressing kind of was an afterthought. No strongman event training was done or anything like that. All the focus basically was on getting this 700-pound deadlift, which I finally achieved. Okay, so there you have it. Background and history of my deadlift progress. So stay tuned now for part 2, and in part 2 I'm going to talk about hints, tips and info that you can help to build your own deadlift. So if you've enjoyed this video, please like the video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that when the next episode of this video series is uploaded, you'll be informed straight away. So this is the end of the video now. Until next time.